Welcome to the Boxing Gossip channel. Please subscribe if you haven't already done so. Sitting down to film a new request that's come through from Patreon from Matthew. So first and foremost, give a shout out to Matthew for his support and for choosing this topic. Essentially, it's giving him a video that he hopefully wants to listen to and giving everyone else hopefully something that other people will find of interest as well, I guess. I'll read from his question. I've got a topic I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on: the monopoly of British boxing. In your opinion, do you think the Hearn Matchroom label under Sky has reached such a point where nobody can actually challenge them at the moment or for the next few years? Frank Warren has Box Nation and reasonable backing from BT as well as a good stable, but it seems like it will still be the copper box shows and comparably low exposure for the foreseeable future. Haymaker Ringstar can't be deemed serious competition at the moment. Cyclone barely have their heads above water, and Hennessy is well Hennessy. Based on the success of the World Boxing Super Series, English affiliation and love from British boxing fans, do you think that Hearn's biggest threat in the next few years could in fact be the Sauerlands? And could you see ITV box office having a role to play in whatever the future holds? Appreciate you taking the time to read this. Always a pleasure to support your channel. Well, thanks very much, Matt, and appreciate your support in helping us build what we're doing here. So, interesting question: the monopoly of British boxing. So, certainly think it's fair to say that Eddie Hearn has established a market-leading position of late. A lot of that is due to the exclusivity deal with Sky, and whilst Frank Warren did set up Box Nation just as that exclusivity deal was being worked out, it took quite a long time to get Box Nation up and running and off the ground, and to a point where it would be considered a substantial competitor. In fact, it's possibly only recently hit that point with the new deal with BT Sports. Funnily enough, if you actually put up the BT Sports and the Sky Sports list of fighters, their rosters if you like, there isn't actually that much between them in terms of quality and quantity. And you could actually make a tangible argument that Frank Warren's stable has more strength in depth and more talent than Eddie Hearn's. A lot of Eddie Hearn's fighters are possibly in the autumn of their career. They're guys who have 2 or 3 fights left. Guys like Kell Brook, guys like Tony Bellew, guys like Crawler, guys like Ricky Burns. However, Eddie Hearn does have one trump card, and that is Anthony Joshua. Anthony Joshua is not just the biggest name in British boxing, but he is the biggest name in British boxing by a million miles. We're talking about a guy who's intending to fight 3 times a year, and each time he fights, he can sell out a Wembley Stadium or a Millennium Stadium. And each time he fights, he can probably do a pay-per-view, buys, upwards of $1 million. And if he's to take on the bigger fights, the Wilders, the Joseph Parkers, he can probably set new box office records and push more towards that £2 million pay-per-view. There isn't anyone else in British boxing who can do that. There are other big names. There are other big names not with Eddie Hearn. Guys like David Haye. Guys like Amir Khan. Guys like Tyson Fury. But none of them have the proven CV and proven established record of selling tickets and selling pay-per-views to the same extent of an Anthony Joshua. And whilst things are more competitive at the minute in terms of lots of new broadcasters getting involved, BT could rival Sky, ITV could rival Sky, currently Anthony Joshua for me is that real substantial difference maker. So his career and the continued trajectory of it is going to be a big part to play for me in the ongoing monopoly of Sky Sports boxing and the ongoing position that they hold as the top of the market. Look, if AJ has 5 or 10 years left in the sport, and if he blows out everyone, if AJ goes down as one of the greatest heavyweights of all time, if he blows out Wilder, Fury, Haye, Parker, Dubois, all of these guys, if he continues his dominant unbeaten streak of devastating knockouts, then Sky can, hold on to that monopoly position for years and years and years. They can be the market leader because AJ's position of dominance as the sort of number one marketed fighter and number one followed fighter isn't going to change for me unless he gets beat, unless he gets stopped. So he is a key determining factor. Looking at the competition, I think Box Nation and BT Sports have some very, very good fighters coming through. Guys like Daniel Dubois, guys like Anthony Yarde, these really are the next generation. And these are guys who can be huge names. These are guys who can be fan favourites. These are guys who can be world titleists, who the British public gets behind. The key question really is, are they going to get the exposure on BT Sports and Box Nation? And that's an unknown question, because we're yet to see the effect of a fighter whose career is built on BT Sports. At the minute, I've got a lot of friends, non-boxing friends, just friends who are sports fans, people I know about, people I know at work who know Anthony Joshua and who know David Haye. Being frank, they wouldn't have heard of Daniel Dubois. Being frank, they wouldn't have heard of Anthony Yarde. The boxing fans, the faithful, people who tune into videos like this one, are well aware of them, and they're, excited to see their trajectory. But in order to get to that position that Joshua was in, where you're doing 90,000 tickets, where you're doing 1 million pay-per-view buys, you need to transcend to the casual market. And for me, right now, whilst Daniel Dubois and Anthony Yarde are being built very well, and whilst their profiles are growing and growing nicely, they're not growing to the same extent as like an Anthony Joshua. We'll have to see how that develops. So I think these are some of the key determining questions. How will BT Sports affect that Box Nation deal? How will BT Sports provide a platform to build these fighters on equivalent Sky? And that's untested territory. How will Anthony Joshua do? How will Anthony Joshua's career trajectory continue? Because for me, if he continues with the dominant streak that he's currently on, it's going to be hard to knock Sky off number one. Looking at ITV, I think ITV is a huge threat. Number one, the World Boxing Super Series has been a huge success, and it appears to be intention to run with it again. So if that continues, they could potentially get even better fighters involved next time, when people will see the success that it's had first time round. You look at a guy like James DeGale, who didn't enter that tournament. You look at a guy like Denis Lebedev, who didn't enter that tournament. These are guys who have been completely left in the dark. These are guys who are falling behind in terms of public profile, where guys like Chris Eubank Jr., guys like George Groves, guys like Callum Smith, who featured heavily in the tournament, these guys' profiles are at an all-time high. Even if these guys lose to each other in the semi-finals and finals, they're still going to be in a position to get big fights. And the World Boxing Super Series, it's been a huge success, and ITV's been a part of that success. So that's a big threat. I think Chris Eubank Jr. is a big threat himself. He's a guy who you look at, he's a charismatic individual. There's a lot of excitement around him inside and outside of the ring. His fight style is electric to watch, and the way he throws punches, the way he overwhelms opponents, really appeals to that casual market. He's a younger guy. He's someone who I can see being a pay-per-view star in this country for the next 5 years. If he can maybe team up with the Sauerlands off the back of the World Boxing Super Series, if he can continue and strengthen that relationship with ITV box office, that's going to be a competitor. You look at Eubank, how many fights has he actually had on box office now with ITV? I mean, Reynold Quinlan, Arthur Abraham, he obviously fought Avni Yildirim. Now he's going to be fighting George Groves, and that's going to be the biggest test yet. So I think that Groves-Eubank fight is another key question. We talk about the key questions. One, Anthony Joshua's continuation. Number two, the effectiveness of BT Sports as a platform. Number three, as a key question, if you like, is actually Eubank Groves. If that is a huge success, if that's something that does 500,000 pay-per-view buys plus on a platform not called Sky Sports Box Office, then that really is a competitor. Right now, whilst we're not clear on the ITV box office numbers, you kind of get the impression that they have not quite rivaled what Sky are doing in terms of the commercials and the numbers that Sky are being able to create right now. But if they can use Groves and Eubank as a platform to take their pay-per-view offering to the next level, if they can get them to a point where they're doing huge numbers, then that will only continue to grow, because fighters are going to like the appeal of boxing on ITV. Fighters are going to like that appeal of saying they're boxing on a terrestrial TV channel. and certainly with the World Boxing Series being such a success and continuing to the second generation of the World Boxing Super Series, ITV very, very much a tangible threat. My honest opinion is that, having looked at these things historically, there seems to be cycles. People go from one promoter to another. Frank Warren actually refers to this quite frequently if you listen to him speak, how there goes through spells of fighters gravitating to him, going elsewhere, coming back to him. It does seem to go in waves, in spells. I think fighters look at other fighters in the market and follow them. Recently, for example, we had Carl Frampton start working with Frank Warren, and then off the back of that you see James DeGale appearing on a Frank Warren card. You see Lee Selby appearing on a Frank Warren card. Obviously, Josh Warrington's now working with Frank Warren. Tyrone Nurse is working with Frank Warren. So even though Sky Sports seem to be holding the #1 position, you actually see names who've been appearing on Sky Sports, and quite big names, big name fighters for Sky Sports, actually working with Frank Warren. So for me, these things tend to go in sort of peaks and troughs. It tend to be a bit of back and forth. You kind of expect cycles, and a lot of big name fighters set the trends. The fact that I think I've given you 3 questions in this one: the success of the Gale Eubank on ITV box office, the success of BT Sports as a platform to build fighters. Those are certainly 2 key ones. I'm just trying to remember what the third is. I guess Anthony Joshua's continued position at the top of the sport. Let me throw in a 4th one for you. The 4th one is, where does Tyson Fury return? That's a big question. That is a real big question. Tyson Fury is a huge draw. He's got a propensity to be involved in huge fights. Will he work with Mick Hennessy? Will he work with Frank Warren? Will he work with Eddie Hearn? There seemed to be the suggestion he would work with Frank Warren and Mick Hennessy, but recent rumblings have kind of suggested he may be more inclined to work with the Sky side. Eddie Hearn's talked about doing business with him. There's been a lot of back and forth between Tyson Fury and Tony Bellew. Look, if Tyson Fury does some sort of deal with Eddie Hearn and starts appearing on Matchroom and Sky Bells, that is a huge shot in the arm. He's a guy who can deliver huge numbers. A Tyson Fury-Joshua fight could well be one of the biggest fights this country's ever seen. Certainly from a commercial perspective, it will be the biggest fight this country's ever seen. So that's another, that's a 4th key question. So lots of unknowns, lots of key tests that will be determined over the next year or 2. Might actually be an interesting topic to review this video in a year's time and see how things have progressed. My take is that throughout the rest of 2017, we're in December, certainly throughout 2018, I expect Sky to hold a dominant position as #1. I think that the competition is a little bit behind right now. They're a little bit behind in terms of numbers, and whilst even BT Sports, they've got some great fighters, those fighters still need to be built. Those fighters need to have their public perceptions grown to a point where they can compete, and I think that's a long-term game. I think they're more looking like 2019 rather than 2018 that they can compete, but a lot can happen between now and then. If Fury comes back on Sky, if Joshua keeps winning, that will be a huge shot in the arm for Sky. Let's see what the World Boxing Super Series does with its second set of tournaments. Let's see how that tournament progresses. That could be huge for ITV box office. A lot of things up in the air. My take is that there will be a rival to Sky, but it will probably come more 2019 rather than 2018, and that will come in the form of an ITV arrangement with Eubank and Sauerland, or it will come in the form of a BT Sport system that has flourished and built fighters like Dubois and Yard and Billy Joe Saunders into household names. That's my take. Let me know your thoughts, people. If you've enjoyed this video, please take the time to hit the thumbs up button. If you're new, you haven't done so before, please do subscribe. If you'd like to make a request like Matt did, please check out my Patreon, which is linked in the description below, and you can always follow me on Twitter at Boxing Gossip. As always, thanks for tuning in.